Welcome to the Empathy Avengers podcast, where we put empathy into action.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Empathy Avengers podcast. We're thrilled to be joined today by Goldmacher and Frances Causey. They are the creators, the director, and the producer of Heist, Who Stole the American Dream, and How We Can Get It Back. Don is a community psychologist who has been making documentaries for my entire lifetime since 1974. And Frances is a former CNN journalist and national editor. We are so excited you both joined us. We're thrilled to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Great to be here. All right, let's dig in. But I want to ask you if there's anything else that you want to elaborate about your bio and background before we jump into talk about the film.
I left CNN in 2000 and I've been making movies ever since, and I continue to make movies.
Amazing. Wonderful. How about you, Don?
People started bugging me when the new president was elected, November 2024, saying, oh my God, you guys have to get Heist updated and re-released because everything in it was very prescient. So that's what has occupied me for the past few months, along with a few other things. I'm trying to sell a screenplay on climate change.
That sounds cool. So tell us a little bit about the film. Is from what year? 2011, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's when it premiered.
So it's oldish, but it is so relevant. And I love that you're updating it.
New updated version is actually a television version with a new beginning and a new ending.
So, where can folks find that?
You can find it at Vimeo.com. Just punch in Heist, Who Stole the American Dream.
Okay, so we'll link to the new version in the show notes so everyone will be able to watch it. It's available.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. So you're going to want to watch it because it is prescient and poignant about today's time, but it does deal with things as they were. I think the biggest thing that had happened before you made the film, right before, was the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis. So just remember that we're talking from those times, but as we will see in this conversation, there's a lot of foreshadowing and things that have gone even much worse now, in my opinion, that hopefully we'll get into during this conversation.
I had only heard about Glass-Steagall and started learning about it maybe a couple of months ago. I didn't know much about it. So maybe if you could explain to our listeners too, because it was repealed, back in 93?
1999.
Okay, I'm way behind. Yeah, folks have gone 25 years now without having Glass-Steagall in effect. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, the Glass-Steagall Act came about during the beginnings of the New Deal because of the 1929 stock crash. And there's a new book out by a New York Times journalist called 1929, which I would certainly recommend to your viewers because it really describes in bloody detail of how that crash came about. Before that crash, there were no rules about selling stock in corner stores, people buying stocks on margin, meaning that you could put up $1 and then borrow $10 and buy a stock. Does that sound familiar now? Sounds like a little bit of crypto and Bitcoin, right? Anyway, so that was happening on a big scale. So when stocks started to move downward in October 1929, people's margin calls were bad. They didn't have money to back it up. Get this cascade of stock sales, and boom, the market starts crashing over a period of months. And it was either Glass or Steagall had been warning of this for a number of years, that this was going to happen. This was all speculation, and there was nothing to back anything. So when FDR was elected president, soon thereafter, Glass-Steagall was put into law saying, you can't do this anymore. You can't have banks taking your money and promising you they're going to keep it safe, and turning it around and lending it to people to buy and sell stocks. So that was the separation of commercial banks from your local bank. That firewall stood in place until these really smart guys in the late 90s said, we don't need that anymore. We haven't had a problem, which meant you created the problem all over again. And the vultures jumped right in once more.
Well, that was interesting. You had a younger Elizabeth Warren quoted at the very beginning of the film. And she's been talking about this for decades, really, now. And she still is out there talking about it, obviously. That was wonderful to see. The other thing that was interesting was the Powell memo, which I didn't really know the extent and how unfortunately important that ended up being. So could you just describe a little bit about the Powell memo and what it means now?
The tobacco lawyer, Lewis Powell, who eventually became a Supreme Court justice in the early 70s, penned a treatise, if you will, Attack on American Free Enterprise. And if you look at the context for that time, we're right on the heels of the Vietnam War. You've got the oil crisis. You've got a lot of turmoil. This became the marching orders for the extreme right wing people who had been really pissed off after the New Deal, who didn't believe in any kind of social democracy, didn't believe in Social Security, didn't believe in any kind of safety net. Attack on American Free Enterprise, there were 6 families that used that memo to start the Heritage Foundation. And the blueprint of today dates to the Powell memo. Liberal elements at universities. He got all of the business leaders, as we say in the movie. We went from 3,000 lobbyists in the 70s to 33,000 when we cut the movie. This was really a blueprint for the rise of Donald Trump. And in my opinion, what's going on with Donald Trump is the spoils of that effort that began with Lewis Powell and the Powell memo, when Democrats were arguing back and forth and being open and compassionate. They were developing a plan to implement it. And eventually, through these 6 family foundations, they started the Heritage Foundation, which crafted Mandate for Leadership. And I'll never forget that interview Donald did. What was it, 2006 with the Heritage Foundation?
7. No, it was 2008. It was 2008, right after the
2008.
crash.
And these guys all cut their teeth on Milton Friedman and Free to Choose, and they were real theological believers. The Mandate for Leadership became Project 2025, which is why we're talking today.
Yes. And the Heritage Foundation is a familiar name that has been causing lots of problems. You also mentioned the Cato think tank, which I don't hear about them as much anymore, but they were, I don't know, I suppose they're still around. They're just not as vocal.
They're still around. They're more
Yeah.
libertarian. I
Right.
think that Heritage is really just arch conservative. Would you agree, Donald?
Yeah, Heritage has always been from the outset determined to dismantle the quote administrative state. And so what you're seeing with the Project 2025 Heritage Foundation document is really the original version on steroids, allowing for an authoritarian to take over.
A really foreshadowing part in the film with Powell memo was where you pointed out that he wanted constant surveillance of the media, which, my goodness, we've got that now for sure.
Just harkening back to the Powell memo, as Frances alluded, this was really a blueprint for how to destroy liberal government, liberal institutions, whether it be the universities, the media, and most importantly, in my view, the Supreme Court, which was never a liberal institution to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay. There was only one period when the Supreme Court was, quote, liberal, and that was the Warren Court. Other than that, it's always been a pro-business court. And now you not only have a pro-business court, you really have a pro-authoritarian court.
Absolutely. They gave the president, whoever the president is, immunity for anything. That is not the democracy that I grew up in and what I want to continue to live in. Yeah, no, there's absolutely an authoritarian push.
Trump went to work when he wasn't elected the second time, and he brought all these people to Mar-a-Lago, and they realized what they had done wrong the first time to implement this revolution of sorts. So not only has he done what he's done in an authoritarian way, and who knows if our democracy will bounce back, but he's challenged executive privilege. Like, I can just see the conversation now with his attorney, that guy that they arrested, I forget his name. How far can we push executive privilege? Because it had never been pushed as far as he knew the courts would probably allow him to push for the exact reasons Donald's talking about, right? So there's no legal precedent for what he's doing. And so he figured, I can do these outrageous things and I've got a 50-50 shot or better that they're going to back me as the chief executor of the country. So it happened so quickly, what he was able to do once he got in, and he exploited the weaknesses in the Democratic Party. And it really is a coup.
I don't know how we're going to last. Maybe he won't last. I'm hoping he dies, but yeah.
What France was just describing very well is really the playbook from the Nazis in terms of the concept blitzkrieg meant you moved in fast and hard before anybody can respond. You're already taken over. And this is the model that they're using: fast, hard, destroying everything in your path, and then challenge people to go and fix it on the back end. That's what the Nazis did in invading country after country. They finally got stopped by the Russians during World War I, because Russia is really a big country. They ran out of supplies as they were approaching Moscow. And guess what they also forgot? Winter in Russia. That's what stopped the Nazis.
You know, that kind of comes full circle because Kevin Roberts of the Heritage Foundation has recently been in the headlines because he's apologizing or agreeing with Tucker Carlson. I believe it was about his Nick Fuentes interview, who is a full-blown white nationalist Nazi.
Yes.
Nick Fuentes is a Nazi. I will say it. If you want to sue me.
Yeah, no, he's totally a Nazi. There's no question.
I do think it was interesting that Kevin Roberts spoke up in defense of that. That's where we are.
The other thing that we're leaving out here about what's so self-evident every day is the open, blatant corruption of Donald Trump and everybody around him. And in order for you to get a deal done, you got to throw some money at him, right?
It's a big riff. It's like a mafia boss. And
that's you
takedown.
said it. I didn't have to say it. That's what the mafia bosses do. And if you go back to his history in New York, you learn that the lawyer who advised him, Roy Cohn, began with the McCarthy Committee in the 50s. And then Roy Cohn taught him, sue everybody, never admit you're wrong.
But also another thing we're missing, which is really well described in the film, and I really give kudos to my partner in crime here, because this is a film that he was born to make. And boy, did I learn a tremendous amount about the macro picture. He rightly pointed out what things started to change in this country with the election of Bill Clinton, right? You see the creation of NAFTA, as Ross Perot famously said, that you see the giant sucking sounds. So really, it's all about what we made the film about, which is the only thing that makes America unique is its middle class. And they conceived a long time ago that it was not good to trickle down, which is the only thing that makes us really exceptional. And they went about to kill that because of the corruption that Donald's talking about. And Ronald Reagan said it, right? Greed is good. The more money you make, the better it is for the country. And so you start to see the Democratic Party turning its back on the building blocks of that middle class. And Donald lived that, growing up the son of a shop steward and born to make this film. And he is a very important person to me and a national treasure, to be honest with you.
So it's a true honor to talk with both of you. So thank you both for your time. And one thing that I was thinking about when you're talking, Francis, is they're still doing that brain drain. He's been attacking H-1B visas, and that is going to affect our middle class, our ability for people to just afford to live in America rather than be anywhere around the world with their talents, that now Trump is just saying, we don't need you.
That's actually a nuanced issue, which we raise in the film. In fact, we show this seminar where HR directors are taught how to not hire American workers, okay? While at the same time, Bill Gates, in another clip in that section, is arguing for, we need more immigrants coming in on H visas. Now, what's the point of these visas of bringing people essentially into Silicon Valley at the time? It was to undercut trained American computer programmers and coders. And so the basic thesis of the film is that what we have been experiencing in this country for the last 40 plus years now is class warfare. And as Warren Buffett famously said in the early 2000s, there is class warfare going on, and my class is winning. What did he mean by that? Essentially, that the Reagan Revolution, followed by Bill Clinton, had accomplished the goal of destroying the middle class, of destroying unions, organized labor, and undercutting decent wages for blue-collar families. Right now, as Bernie Sanders likes to say, 60% of American families are living paycheck to paycheck. So we are a debtor economy, unless you're in the top 1% or 5%. That's who's swimming well. Everybody else is drowning, which led to the election of this, quote, Democratic Socialist in New York City a couple of months ago.
But one of the things that people, and I don't think we put this in the film, but one of the things that's really obvious is the Business Roundtable got out from behind their desks, and Powell said, come to D.C., lobby on behalf of business, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They did away with things like overtime. You could be a Taco Bell assistant manager, and instead of getting paid hourly, they put you on salary. You'd be paid a lot more if you actually were paid for the hours that you work. They did away with shift differential. They did away with all of these building blocks that enable people to get decent value for their labor. And so now that's why we're in the gig economy. The heist of the economy has been so thoroughly carried out. Trump has been reduced to muttering around the White House and doing what he's doing with the xenophobia and the racism. There are no more dog whistles. He just says it out. The coup has been so wholesale successful that when he gets desperate, he just panders to the racism, which is not a new concept. You scapegoat the people who can least fight back. I have a lady who sits with my mom in Florida, and she just didn't show up one day, and she's sitting in her tiny little apartment. She's Haitian, and she's afraid to come out because she'll be deported.
Yeah.
So this is the spoils of corruption. And as Rachel Maddow gently said when he was first elected, she said, this is about picking your pocket.
Yeah.
This is really about an Uber transfer of wealth.
It's
And
a
let's
huge
have it.
rift. And you mentioned in the film, you talked about, and I think it was the first time that, in 2011, that anyone probably used the term oligarchy or oligarch to talk about the United States. But now that's all we've got. Like, that's the entire cabinet. That's the people who are donating to the ballroom, all these people.
There's no separation. These are the people who are cutting deals that benefit themselves and making laws to benefit themselves and their families and their companies.
Yes. And to your point about the full-on coup, so they've hijacked, they've taken away and stripped down all of the whistleblower oversight mechanisms that were in place, and all the investigator generals, they're gone, and they're not proceeding with those investigations of other corruption that had been happening. And so basically now it's just all bets are off. They're just going to keep going, and they're totally proud of it. Like that Great Gatsby party that they had, and they don't care. Yeah, they're just like rolling over everybody. He's now even saying that the word affordability is a Democratic hoax. What is going on? This guy is insane. And he's so gloating about the fact that they've won and they've done their full-on takeover of the United States. And we are now an authoritarian nation. There's no question.
He is a malignant narcissist, which means that he can't handle being attacked in any way, shape, or form. That's just one of the features. There are many others that we don't need to spend time on. But this wonderful psychiatrist, Randy Lee, the very first term, brought together a group of psychiatrists to diagnose what was going on here. And of course, they got in trouble for doing that, but they were correct in saying, this guy's a menace and will be a menace if he's allowed to continue. And here we are in Act 2 of his performance. So he is very dangerous. And I just want to look back for a moment to what Frances started to open up about the racism that's always utilized in the United States by the right. And Frances has a wonderful film about the origins of all of that called The Long Shadow, A History of Slavery and White Supremacy in the South. Your viewers definitely want to watch. People love that film because it tells the truth in a way that you haven't seen before in movies in this country. I can assure you. And we had to beg, cajole, and persuade Frances to not only make the film, but to be in the film.
Yeah.
Because I thought very powerfully it was important for a white Southerner to be on camera to tell the truth. Now there's another white Southerner finally telling the truth. His name is Stuart Stevens. He's been a GOP operative, born and raised in Mississippi for the last 50 years. He wrote a book a few years ago called It Was All a Lie. And he says, the basis of the Republican Party for the last 50 years is stone cold racism. That's the whole message. Really urge your viewers to read that book.
Our nation was born in this. White supremacy is in our DNA from our founding. We created whiteness The slave owners went to the poorest of the poor white folks and said, no matter how low you get in society, you'll always be better than a black person. And I think there's probably 30 to 35% of the country today that really believes that white is superior to black, because you have a constant drumbeat of policy since the New Deal by the Dixiecrats, right? They couldn't even agree to get rid of lynching, right? And so you still see it prevalent today, no matter how much Trump tells you it's not, right? Death by 1,000 cuts to people of color, not letting them, for instance, get in on Social Security early on. The two prime black vocations of the era, sharecropping and domestic service. The South, the Dixiecrats made sure African Americans in our country could not initially get Social Security. And all these moments of prosperity post World War II were off limits to African Americans who couldn't build any kind of generational wealth.
And they were also ostracized. They were redlined out of the contention for the prime real estate.
And they also suffered disproportionately from the 2008 crash.
Yes.
Millions of black people lost their homes.
Was that because the subprime deal preyed upon them mainly?
Yes.
No income, no job, the subprime mortgages. Absolutely.
Yeah. I should tell you one little anecdote about the film that I think your viewers will appreciate. We started conceiving this film in 2006. We read about 21 books during the course of 2006 and 2007. Finally, toward the end of the summer of 2007, I said, I think we got this. And at that time, 2 money market funds at Bear Stearns went bankrupt. And I went, that was the signal to me. Here it comes. When we started doing our first day of filming in the Rocky Mountains, you know what happened that day?
I'll never forget it.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were taken over by the federal government because they were going bankrupt. And I turned to Frances and I said, oh my God, this is it. I said, we need to book every single interview right now because this can happen any day. So interviews were booked for the week of September 15th. You know what happened on that day? The federal government let Lehman Brothers go bankrupt. Next day, the stock market went through the toilet. That's how on it we were.
That is amazing that you had that foreshadowing, and what a great snapshot of that time. But like I said, the foreshadowing of now is just so crazy, like how we got here. It really does paint that picture for us. So it's an amazing film. You really should be proud. I'm so glad that you updated it. What's new in the update?
You can see that we now show how the heist has unfolded, and all of these characters are running around DC stealing everything they can and bribing everybody they can and saying, we don't need any of those stinking regulation anymore because we can just take everything.
No moral pretense, nothing.
Right.
It's just open season.
Yes.
Well, I remember right after Trump was inaugurated the first time, it was a very quick issue that he was violating the emoluments clause with the hotel, right? He had a Trump hotel in DC.
I haven't heard anything about that anymore.
And then that's it. Then nobody cares about the emoluments clause, which is why he's able to grift everything.
Why he's made $600 million off of crypto, allegedly.
Probably more. So you're asking what's new on the back end. We start describing how people can be part of the resistance movement. We give very clear examples of what it will take to defeat an authoritarian government. And one of the key things we point out is this very important book that was written in the early 90s by an American, Gene Sharp. It's called From Dictatorship to Democracy. So really, we are going from democracy to dictatorship, but the same principles apply that are in the book. Build a nonviolent movement of resistance, non-cooperation. Now, everybody is adopting that strategy of non-cooperation. Again, we were a little bit ahead of the curve because I was very familiar with the book, had read it during Trump's first administration. This is the playbook, which has been used in other countries to topple their authoritarian governments. And on our new website, Heist, the movie 2025.com, you will find a list of resources, of books to read, podcasts to watch, etc., that will allow people to keep up with what's going on. We have a section on the front page of the website that is called Heist Updates.
But it's necessary right now. We have so few places that we can go to for independent journalism. So I'm thrilled to have another place.
We'll link to that in the show notes as well.
One of the things I want to say about all of this is it's critical to not get overwhelmed by the daily onslaught, but just be clear. You must have a strategy if you're going to be successful. So flailing around, and that's not going to do it, because they are working from a strategy, right? And it's called Project 2025. They spent 4 years figuring this one out.
Yeah.
We're doing it on the fly.
I will definitely check out that resource. I encourage our listeners to as well.
No Kings Alliance is a grand alliance of hundreds of organizations across the country. They've already demonstrated they can bring out 7 million people on a mass demonstration. So we know what it looks like, and we know what it takes.
Yeah. And I think a little bit of an issue with the Democrats or the resistance party, if you will, is that we are multifaceted and diverse, and we are not all the same. We're not one dimensional the way the kind of rich, white, male Republicans in general are, like, to be stereotypical. But they all align together. So even the oligarchs and the capitalist people, it was easier for them to align together because they all were greedy. And that was what they had in common. Whereas for us, we have empathy, right? That's what we have in common. That's why we have this podcast. We're trying to promote empathy and bring it back. But other than that, it's amorphous, right? So it's hard to just define.
It's very easy to get fixated on Trump. He's a showboat.
Let me go back. White and black would worship together in churches in the 1700s. And then as the slave economy prospered, you gradually saw you had the black and the white Baptists together. And then slavery, that's why the black Baptists left the Southern Baptist Convention, because the black Baptists wanted reparations and things like that, and they wouldn't agree to that, the Southern Baptist Convention. But black and white, as John Powell says in the film, we were much more integrated in the 1600s and the 1700s than we are now. And so as slavery becomes, you have this huge economy. And what I go into is the people in my family and the people I grew up with that benefited from slavery. I felt like a white person needed to talk to other white people about this is what happened. Forget what you were told or not told, for the most part, in your 7th grade history class. This is really what happened. And we have a wonderful scholar in the film, Gerald Horne, who's just unbelievable. Anyway, long story short, black and white were more integrated 200 years ago than we are now, which shows you the power of racism. And let's be clear, Lee Atwater pointed this out too. Democrats have used race many times. Bill Clinton used it. It's a go-to proven winner in our country if you want to get elected, sadly.
The Christian evangelical movement in this country was really brought into politics by Ronald Reagan, moral majority in the late 70s, early 80s. But they were always there. They were, quote, not political at the time, but they are now. You look at the composition of the Supreme Court right now, you've got these people on the court, okay? And you've got them throughout the government, and they are determined to create an American theocracy. I borrow that term from one of the leading Republican operatives who wrote the Southern Strategy for Richard Nixon. By 2006, he saw the monster he had created, and he wrote this brilliant book called American Theocracy. His name is Kevin Phillips. We spoke with him trying to get him in our film Heist, but we could not work out a schedule where we could do the film shoot. And that's my lasting regret, because the book is brilliant and totally predicts what we're dealing with right now. He was very worried about the evangelicals.
They are not very Jesus-like, those evangelicals.
They're not very spiritual.
They're not at all doing what would Jesus do type stuff. And I am a reproductive rights activist, and I know that it was a long game by those motherfuckers to impact the court and all of that. Even the reproductive rights thing is racist.
Yeah, definitely.
You know,
We'll need to focus on the last part of how we get the American dream back.
What you're dealing with now, you're dealing with two fronts at the same time. On the one hand, you must defeat this authoritarian takeover, which is more than a full-time job involving all of us. And that requires a variety of strategies. So that's the first civil war. The second civil war is within the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is still controlled by corporate interests. They still want their own deregulation. They still want to walk away with the majority of the pot of money. They're not willing to give that up either. So there is a civil war within the Democratic Party taking place for who's going to take over here. Is it going to be the continued corporate dominance with their big money donors? Or is it going to be a people's movement?
You're right. APAC and some of these PACs that are just feeding, and the lobbyists are also feeding many of the Democratic politicians as well.
And all of that really got unleashed by
Citizens United
2010.
2010.
Yeah. Corporations are people, no problem. They can do whatever they want.
One of the things that's not really known to people, and this is why I left CNN, right? First of all, news gathering is expensive. Why not just plop a pundit up there who most of the time you don't have to pay? And they are a byproduct of the media, political, industrial complex, right?
Yeah.
You can't run for dog catcher without having $1 million a year consultant on both sides of the aisle. So Citizens United unleashed just this huge amount of money, and they're all doing the same thing, redistricting on both sides. You could certainly make the case the Republicans did the initial injury and all that. It's to the point every time I deign to watch CNN, which is rarely, I just shake my head and tell my wife, wow, this is a terrible product, but it's a terrible disservice to the country. Because what it did is people in the middle of the country, nobody cared anymore about what was going on there. They didn't send news crews to Kansas anymore, or Missouri, or whatever, because they decided after O.J. Simpson, we're going to cover two stories today. Once they deregulated media, did away with the fairness doctrine, the coup has been a vertical assault. Roger Ailes had Fox News drawn up in the 70s. So this has been a well-implemented strategy that they've been disciplined. And the backlash now by some Republicans against Trump is just because the whole thing has gone so immorally off the rails. What's up is down.
And now it's got even worse with the media is basically the billionaires bought it. So
Yeah, we talk about that. We go from 60 media companies to six. So own the megaphone. And I have a personal illustration of remembering a time when there was a firewall between the business office at CNN and the newsroom. And now that's not the case anymore. We never, ever had to worry about. We had the backing of Tom Johnson when we were reporting stories. We knew there was some cooperation going on between the government and CNN. Like we found Terry Nichols in that farmhouse in Dexter, Michigan after Oklahoma City, well before the FBI did. They asked us to not go live with it. We would do stuff like that out of safety. But yeah, no, it's a hot mess.
When we got clear about what the themes were in Heist, there were two themes. One was the class warfare that we could see. The other was the goal of the right wing to deregulate everything in the United States, to dismantle the New Deal, in other words.
Yeah.
To do everything to destroy the New Deal.
That's what healthcare debate is about right now.
Yep.
So the dismantling of the mass communications was a key goal, again, of the Powell Memo and of all these people who want to destroy government. And remember, Ronald Reagan famously said in his inauguration, government is not the solution. Government is the problem. So as we had all of our research gathered, we knew what we wanted to do. You alluded to it a few minutes ago. We said we're becoming an oligarchy if we're not already there. So in that sense, we were prescient, not only about that, but about what was going to unfold. But that the 2008 crash was another symptom of the deregulation, right?
The current conversation about affordability, the word that keeps coming up in this conversation has been prescient. With Mandami winning in New York City, that conversation about affordability is everywhere now. So your movie is just so meaningful.
That's why my friends pressed me. They said, you got to re-release the movie. And I said, oh, please give me a break. Here I am trying to sell this climate change script. Stop bothering. No, they kept pounding on me. I said,
Everything is urgent right now. So I applaud you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to update. We do need to understand what's going on, and we need to have steps to come together to fix it. So I appreciate that so much.
this is a great teaching tool.
Shocking how little Americans are pretty gullible.
I'm pretty dialed in, and I learned so much from the film, and I'm proud. I think I was less dialed in back then, as you were, obviously. So I just was going along with what everybody else was. I do want to mention one thing is we talked earlier about NAFTA being bad and destroying some of the middle class and changing the way we get goods and trade here in America. And now we have tariffs. So in my mind, the tariff was like putting blanket tariffs was an excuse for him to grift and do the shakedown. Because then he goes to Canada and he goes, "Well, what are you going to give me so that we can change that?" So that's pretty much what he did. And he was just wanting to shake down individual countries. And so he made the blanket tariffs so that he could have leverage on them.
I think it was a lead story in the digital New York Times version, but he talked today about addressing going back and undoing NAFTA. They just broke that today.
Now
Yeah.
we apparently decide, I
Now
don't need NAFTA anymore.
Yeah, why? Why would he? Yeah.
I guess that's why I'm surprised that we even still have anything that even resembles NAFTA, because he just destroyed everything and burned it all down.
There's still there's still supply chains and business is slow. It's like turning a battleship. It takes time to do those things. And if
Sure.
if it's not bright, such shiny object, he loses interest. Who knows?
Las Vegas is hurting because Canadian tourists or any other
Good.
tourists aren't
Oh,
going
and
to come to Las
Canadians.
Vegas anymore.
Yeah.
So there will be casualties all over the place.
We're in the middle of the holiday season, and I'm sure they're going to start seeing the effects of how expensive things are with the inclusion of tariffs and that pricing.
People are already buying less expensive stuff. But again, the top 5-10%, they're not hurting. They're just doing fine.
One of the last lines in the movie is Van Jones saying, "Are we locusts or are we honeybee? I am a crocheter, and one of the things that I crochet around here, we are honeybee."
I love it. A
You know?
honeybee.
Be a honeybee.
Be a honeybee.
A honeybee.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Frances, for
Thank
joining
you.
us. This has been a phenomenal conversation, and I would love to have a part 2. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us once again for the Empathy Avengers podcast, where kindness is your superpower and empathy saves the day.
All right. Keep doing what you're doing.
The Empathy Avengers, where we put empathy into action.